Welcome in. It is Big Ten Today. It's great to have you with us. Dave Revson here. We are brought to you by Old National Bank. Michael Huff's going to join me in just a bit. We will talk some baseball as well. But with national championship contenders on both sides, we are going to start with lacrosse. That is our big story, the Big Ten tourneys coming up this weekend. Let's take a look at the brackets first. This is the women's side being played at Northwestern. The number one ranked Wildcats, the defending national champ. They get Johns Hopkins, which knocked off Michigan in the quarters. That's the first of two semis tomorrow. The other will pit second-seeded Penn State against Rutgers, which also pulled a surprise in the quarters, knocking off the third seed Maryland. On the men's side, the tourney is in Columbus. These games are tomorrow night on the network. Women's tourney in the afternoon. The seeds held in the quarters here. So the top seed, Johns Hopkins, will get fourth seed Michigan, while second-seeded Maryland will take on the third seed Penn State. And who better to break it all down than Big Ten Network lacrosse analyst Mark Dixon. Mark, let's start with the men, and let's start with Michigan and Johns Hopkins. I want to talk about the Blue Jays first, because this has turned into a really big story. I mean, anyone who follows lacrosse knows how good Johns Hopkins has been historically, but they haven't been all that good recently. Just one Final Four in the last 15 years. They have had a tremendous season this year. So for those who haven't followed it, bring them up to date on how Johns Hopkins has done this.
So under the new coaching staff, Peter Milliman, and then his offensive coordinator, John Crawley, defensive coordinator, Jamison Kesterer, volunteer assistant, Brian Kelly. Those are three alums working underneath Peter Milliman. So you go back to 2 years ago, 2022, where the Blue Jays were sub 500, lost at Homewood Field to the University of Maryland 22-7 in a stadium that was 75% red, in a game that was 22-3 at the end of the third quarter. You fast forward 2 years. Hopkins is 5-0, regular season Big Ten champions outright for the first time in program history, and they're the number one seed going into the Big Ten tournament. How'd this happen? I think the players have developed. They have been good in the transfer portal at not bringing in a ton of student athletes, but the right student athletes. They've got some freshmen contributing. But overall, Dave, I think it's a better understanding from the players of what it means to be a Johns Hopkins Blue Jay. Speaking with Peter Milliman a couple days ago in preparation for the Big Ten tournament, he said, the seniors, the guys that have been there through the lean times, really saw what it meant to be a Johns Hopkins Blue Jay in their victory over Maryland a couple weeks ago, 7-5 at Homewood Field, the same site where they were demolished 2 years ago. And that's a long process. These are guys who had to deal with COVID, had to deal with restrictions, and Peter Milliman, as a head coach, didn't get to meet the alumni, which it's the most unique alumni base in the country when it comes to men's lacrosse. So I think you throw all of those things together, on top of the team being pretty darn talented, that's where you have the Johns Hopkins Blue Jays going in as the number one seed for the Big Ten tournament.
Well, it's really a great story, and certainly firsthand the incredible passion for Johns Hopkins lacrosse. Let's talk about the team that they're playing here in the semifinals in Michigan, a high-scoring team. What's Michigan's formula to have a shot here against Hopkins?
First and foremost, they have to win faceoffs, and I think they can do that with Justin Wiedfeldt, one of the best in the business. And in the Michigan's 3 losses in conference, Dave, they played goaltenders that had career days against them, one of which is Chase Erlin from Johns Hopkins. So they're going to have to shoot the ball very well. That might sound elementary, but when you're talking about goaltenders in the Big Ten in 2024, top to bottom might be the best contingent of goalies in the country. Chase Erlin is no exception for Johns Hopkins. Mikey Boehm, Justin Tiernan, Ryan Cohen, they're going to need to find the back of the net, because I do anticipate them getting an abundance of possessions due to the face-off work of Justin Wiedfeldt.
Michigan team that won the Big Ten tourney a year ago, so that is one of the semifinals. The other one is Penn State and Maryland. The Terps have really dominated this tournament through the years. They have won 4 Big Ten tournament titles. It's twice as many as any other school. This doesn't feel like a vintage Maryland team. They're still very good, though. Give us a sense for where the Terrapins are heading into this tournament.
So I think the 2022 team was one for the ages, one of the greatest teams all time in the history of men's college lacrosse. So I think it's an unfair comparison that a lot of people put on this 2024 team. But what Maryland does lack is that alpha male, that go-to on the offensive end of the field. The one player they do have that's a field tilter is Luke Weirman, their face-off man. So, you know, much like Michigan, they're going to get possessions. It's what can the offense do with those extra possessions? Because on the other end of the field, you've got one of the best defenses, if not the best defense in the Big Ten. So they're going to, you know, when you hold Hopkins to 7 goals, which they did in the regular season finale, and only score 5. Obviously, I'm not a math major, but that's not good. But the offense is going to have to show up for Maryland. They're going to have to find guys to run goals together, and they do have spurtability. In the regular season matchup against Penn State, they went on a 3-goal run in a minute and a half. Then in the fourth quarter, they went on a 4-goal run that flipped that game on its head. So Maryland's going to have to find a way to do that again this coming Thursday in Columbus.
Yeah, to your point, this is a Maryland team that's taken the fewest shots in the Big Ten, so offense has not been the forte. You mentioned the regular season matchup against Penn State. It was a close game. It was a 2-goal game. As you say, Penn State had plenty of opportunities to win the game. You look at this series historically, and I mean, it's crazy. Penn State is 1-41 all time against Maryland, but kind of you look at, as you talk about, this isn't a vintage Maryland team, and you look at the regular season meeting, it doesn't seem unreasonable to think that Penn State would have a chance to win it. What would it take for them to win this semifinal?
Yeah, and I think going into this game, Penn State, you could put them as the favorite to win this game. The two schools can't even agree on how many times they've played. Like, that's how bitter this series is. And Penn State, how can they win? Well, they've got TJ Malone, the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year, and they've got Jack Frassion, Big Ten Specialist of the Year, both 2 years running. So on both ends of the field, you have studs. But I think ultimately it's a belief, it's a mindset that Penn State can win this game, because in the regular season games that we've covered, including the one that happened back in March of this year, Penn State played maybe the best quarter, the first quarter of any team I've seen in the country. They were up 6-2, and Maryland looked like they didn't know what hit them. But then Maryland started to chip away, and you could see Penn State panic. And you've seen this happen in this rivalry, in this series over the years. Penn State has to have the mindset that we have a killer instinct. We can put these guys away, and they just have to do it. They certainly have the talent. But between the ears, I think, is the biggest challenge for Penn State when it comes to the Maryland Terrapins.
Yeah, it's been rough, as we talked about. I mean, you can understand why psychologically they might wonder whether they can win it. That win, by the way, came back in 2019. Let's go to the women now. Hopkins and Northwestern is one of the semifinals. Northwestern, as everyone knows, the defending national champs here. They have lost twice this year. They lost just once all of last year. It feels like there's a little more parity at the top maybe in women's lacrosse this season. That was such a dominant Northwestern team a year ago. This is a really high-scoring Wildcat team, second in the nation in goals. Bring people up to date, kind of similarly to what you did with Hopkins, like on what's going on here with Northwestern, big picture, as they look to defend their title.
Yeah, I think they're an incredibly talented team, and they can run you off the field if you're not careful. So when you look at Northwestern, it starts with the Skane train, Izzy Skane, the reigning Tewaaraton winner from 2023. She's an incredible player. Aaron Corkendall is a tremendous player. And then you have Madison Taylor. So they have offensive juggernauts. Sammy White on the defensive end is as good as they come. And they're going to and they have swagger. You know, the Northwestern Wildcats women's lacrosse team, they have swagger. They have confidence. And they truly believe that they're going to run the table again in the Big Ten. So when you couple that confidence with the talent, they're going to be an incredibly difficult out for the Johns Hopkins Blue Jays. But what they have to be careful of is it was upset city last weekend in the quarterfinals with Hopkins knocking off Michigan, Rutgers stunning Maryland. Northwestern has to take a step and say, you know what, that could be us if we don't play our game and if we don't handle our business. So I think Northwestern is on alert, no question, but they've got all the talent in the world and all the skills in the world to win this semifinal game.
That helps me playing at home, too. They've won 41 straight home matches. That is the longest streak in the country. You mentioned Hopkins. They knocked off Michigan, which was a pretty significant win. I mean, Michigan is really good, an elite team nationally this year. Again, similar question as we talk about with the men, with the underdogs here, kind of what's the formula for Johns Hopkins against Northwestern, aside from perhaps what you talked about, maybe if the Wildcats are slightly overconfident?
Sure, and I think you have to point to the familiarity aspect that Hopkins has with Northwestern. Not only having played them in the regular season, but their head coach, Tim McCormick, was an assistant under Kelly and Monty Hiller prior to him getting the head coaching job at Hopkins. And if that's not enough, Madison Doucette, the graduate transfer, is the starting goaltender for Hopkins. She played at Northwestern. So there's a high level of familiarity. But what I like about this Hopkins team and covering them this year is the way they play. They play much faster, much looser than they have in the past. And they have athleticism to boot. You know, they're still not at that Northwestern level, but they're getting there. And I have to believe that Hopkins feels pretty darn good after knocking off Michigan, that they might be playing with the good old house money coming into the semifinals. If we win, that only strengthens our seeding for the NCAA tournament. But I do feel at this point in the season, they have done enough to earn a bid to the NCAAs. But still, going into this semifinal at Northwestern on their home field with the opportunity to advance to a championship game, that's plenty of motivation for this Blue Jay squad.
And there wouldn't be any doubt about that NCAA tourney bid if they do that, but they are 0-15 all time against number one teams. Want to get a quick thought on Rutgers and Penn State. You were talking about the upsets earlier in the tournament, and we mentioned it with Rutgers knocking off Maryland. What do you think of this matchup between the Scarlet Knights and the Nittany Lions?
I think it's going to be a lot of fun. You know, with Rutgers, it's Cassidy Spillis. She is the heart and soul of that Rutgers team, taking on a Penn State team that is no strangers to upsets, knocking off Northwestern this year, the only Big Ten women's team to do so. So I think, again, much like Northwestern, Penn State now probably was thinking they were going to get the Terrapins, and the Scarlet Knights just up and shocked the women's lacrosse world with that stunning upset of Maryland last weekend. So you're dealing with a team that knows it's fighting for its NCAA tournament life in Rutgers versus a Penn State team that, again, much like Hopkins, you have to feel pretty good about your body of work up to this point, but a win would certainly seal the deal. And this is a Penn State team that's been to the national semifinals just a few years ago, and they've had some lean years since. This is a really, really talented team looking to take that next step in reestablishing the Nittany Lions as one of the premier programs in the country.
Great stuff, Mark. Should be a fantastic weekend of lacrosse. And, of course, you can catch all the action here on the Big Ten Network. Really appreciate your insights, as always.
It's a great time of the year, Dave, and I'm so happy to be with you and talking lacrosse here on the Big Ten Network anytime.
Huff is here with us. Bolton's a young man from here in Chicago. Obviously, our Big Ten Network studios are in Chicago, as I think most people are aware, and someone that you are pretty familiar with.
Yeah, very exciting to see the story about Mike, not only because he's a Chicago boy, he's a White Sox ace player. Jerry Reinsdorf with the White Sox organization, who I still work for right now, Amateur City Elite. Jerry started this program in 2007, and Kenny Fulman, one of the coaches who's still with the program, led right now by Anthony Olivo, Troy Williams, helps kids in the inner city by providing coaches, the uniforms. This is high-end travel. the cost of the tournaments, the cost of the travel to these tournaments, and with the express goal of helping these kids get to college. Now, if they can play in college, great. If they can play beyond college, even better. But for the most part, the whole program is set up. They have tutors for these kids during the week, as well as multiple nights of training. It's really to help the kids, and Mike is one of those kids. It's so much fun, the success story, again, from a former leadoff hitter watching this leadoff hitter. The other thing about the ACE program, not only are they helping these kids just get to college, there have been some pretty good ones. A couple first-rounders, Corey Ray, who went to Louisville, and Ed Howard a year ago that the Cubs drafted. So there's some talent, and Mike is showing it at Purdue.
Yeah, it's really neat, and he continues to have a great year this year. He's
Yes.
third in the Big Ten in stolen bases. He's in the top 10 in on-base percentage as well. Let's talk about this team. I mean, I mentioned off the top, now 10 straight conference wins. They tie their all-time mark. What has stood out to you about Purdue? We got a chance to see them in a pretty cool deal at Wrigley Field
anytime
here in
kids
Chicago
get to play in a
last
major
week.
league stadium, that's really cool. For Purdue, not one of the teams that the coaches said top 6. And I have to admit, I kind of agree that these weren't quite a top 6 team in the Big Ten when you look at the talent that was around the league. But these guys are second in pitching. They know how to play defense, and they put a lot of pressure on teams, as we just see with Mike at the top of the lineup. Mike, right now, career stolen base record, top 5 in terms of triples, on base percentage. So this is a team that's doing the little things that put pressure on other teams and let other teams make that mistake. And all of a sudden, they've had 3 series in a row. When you think about them sweeping Northwestern, you think about prior to that sweeping Michigan State. You think about prior to that, sweeping Rutgers, a Rutgers team that was supposed to be totally loaded this year. And when you talk about 10 Big Ten wins in a row, I don't care if you're preseason 1 or preseason 13, doing that is incredible.
They haven't even trailed in 63 innings.
Just it's kind of crazy to think about.
It's nuts.
But that speaks to the top of the order. That speaks to Mike. It speaks to this ball club, Luke Gaffney, the redshirt freshman hitting third. They're getting on teams early, and then they're extending. They're not just happy getting that 1 run in the first, maybe 2. Their second time through, they're getting guys across the plate. Their third time through, they're scoring runs. So they are putting pressure all the way through 9 innings. And whether you're a starter power pitcher, whether you're a sneaky reliever, they're finding ways to lay down a bunt, hit the opposite way, and get guys around the bases. That just continues to put pressure on other teams.
They've got DePaul at home today, and then Indiana coming up this weekend. So again, if you win the first game of that Indiana series, you set a new record for the longest conference win streak in school history. The Boilers tied for first place in the Big Ten entering May. They are tied with Illinois, a team that actually dropped 2 of 3 over the weekend to Maryland. It was the first conference series they had lost, but this is an Illinois team that has exceeded expectations this year, and it's certainly exceeded what we saw from them in the non-conference, which at times was uneven.
Yeah, again, Illinois, another one of those teams that was not in that top 6, and rightly so. When you look at the Iowas with the 3 big arms, the Indianas, the bats, the Maryland, the Rutgers with the bats, there was a reason they were just outside that top 6 by all the coaches. And as you said, Dave, an incredibly challenging non-conference. Before they got into the Big Ten schedule, they were 0-11 against those types of teams. But when you look at that more closely, at the time they played, 5 of those 11 teams were ranked in the top 20. And a couple were really close. 2 others that they lost to are now teams ranked in the top 20, so that's 7 of the 11. 2 other teams have winning records, 10-plus games over 500. So you look at Dan Hartlieb and what he did with these guys, he really challenged them. Now, any coach would tell you, I'm hoping to win a couple of those games, but even if he didn't, once they got into the Big Ten schedule and the Big Ten games, they were confident that they knew they had faced the very best teams in the nation and had come close a lot. All it took was a couple things falling into place. I think the warm weather might have been one of them, because this is a ball club right now with 20-plus home runs more than the second best Big Ten team. So they are launching it, and it's a bunch of different guys hitting the home runs. So the way Purdue puts pressure on people, a bunt, a steal, a walk, a double steal, Illinois just says, we're just going to go easy around the bases. We're just going to hit them, run and jog. We're not going to steal, get dirty, maybe scuff things up.
Right.
So they've really been able to find their stride power. Their pitchers have come around nicely, and they have really been swinging the bat good, which, again, puts both of these teams at the top of the Big Ten that with only 3 weekends left, I don't think anybody really predicted.
Well, to your point on swinging the bat well, how about the midweek game this week against Indiana State? They scored 21 runs against a team that's in the top 25.
In the top 25,
yeah,
exactly.
You talk about ranked teams and how do you fare against ranked teams.
There you have it.
21-11 against a ranked team.
I'm sure they were hoping for some of those earlier before, not now. But the weather is good, and these guys are playing great. And they have earned, both of these teams have earned being at the top of the Big Ten.
It is the proverbial better late than never.
Yes, very true.
All right, we're going to get more from Mike How Big Status, brought to you by Old National Bank. We are breaking down the excellence of Ohio State tennis. They won the Big Ten double this year, the regular season and the conference tourney champs. Team that won the ITA Indoor National title over the winner, the 30-1 into the NCAA tourney for the 24th straight time. Will host Cleveland State Friday. Were they to win there, they would get the winner of Vandy and Oklahoma State. Ty Tucker has been the head coach in Columbus for 25 years. He joins us now. He is today's big interview. Coach, 18 straight regular season titles. You've won 15 Big Ten tourney titles. So I'm not going to ask you, are you surprised or how does it feel? I mean, you do this every year, it seems, but how has this team this year and how they performed compared with your expectations going in?
Every time I get on here with you guys at the end of a tennis season, a Big Ten season, you guys try to jinx it. So we're going to try and keep it going. You guys try to talk about 18 straight or 17 straight last year. But, it was a good year. We felt like we could make some noise with this freshman class. They were tied with Texas for the best recruiting class in the country 5 years ago as freshmen. They came in and absolutely started to light the world on fire as young guys until we got caught up in COVID. So, the biggest challenge was keeping guys together to come play that fifth year because this is the last season for COVID for spring sports. So, that was the most challenging aspect of it all, was to keep the Kingsley and the Boulay and the Letschanig and the Robert Cash together to put, I wouldn't say life on hold, but, one's going to go to medical school, one's finance major, two have done pretty well on the professional circuit through the last 3 years, played every summer, play 8, 9, 10 pro tournaments and been able to get up into 400 in the ATP rankings. Boulay and Kingsley. So, keeping that crew together to come chase one more title was the main focus. And it was good to see that, what Ohio State meant to them, because they had some unfinished business. And, I'm excited to see what happens starting this Friday at home against Cleveland State, but obviously nervous because that's who I am. Get a little bit very nervous before every match, and try to dot the I's and cross the T's with the preparation and see where it goes.
Okay, I know you do get nervous, and you mentioned us potentially jinxing you. You are a famously superstitious human being. So
I've got problems.
So give people a sense, like, how do these superstitions, how do these fears of the Big Ten Network hosts jinxing you, how do all of these things manifest themselves? Like, what do you do to try to ward them off?
I mean, that's nothing. You jinxing me now. Try to be on the road in these Big Ten cities and having to find the laundromat to make sure that you're doing your clothes, because I only take one set of clothes and I wear the same clothes for every match. So got to find got my favorite laundromats in every city in the Big Ten. I come in and I think people look at me like I'm crazy. I'm washing one pair of shorts, a pair of sweatpants, and 2 shirts. So it's and it happens twice a week, every week. Big Ten cities around the country.
All right, so you wear the same clothes. Are there other superstitions?
There wasn't an echo. I do.
Are there other superstitions that you've got aside from that?
We haven't eaten at Olive Garden in 25 years, so there's one.
Why not? What happened?
Sorry, Olive Garden.
What happened at your last Olive Garden meal?
We lost. That's what happened. I told you I had problems, and you wanted to go there.
You're right. You warned me. Let's get more into your team. I saw in an article earlier this year. I thought this was a really interesting quote. You said, "I never think that we're the top dog," and I think that people listening to you would get an understanding as to where that comes from. But I do think it's interesting. I mean, look, the results that your team has had through the years would tell a very different story. I mean, you come into the Big Ten season every year, or almost every year, as the expected Big Ten champ. So how do you instill in your players that notion of, hey, we're not the top dog?
I mean, it's just day in, day out with the practice and everything that you tell them, everything that you feed them. I mean, everybody has scholarships and everybody has great coaches nowadays. Everybody's trying to win. You look under a rock when you're out on the recruiting trail, and you'll find 10 coaches under it. So, it's nothing's easy and nothing's given. And to do what we've been able to do, 18 consecutive Big Ten titles, just imagine the amount of matches we had to win down a player in the lineup, or a guy sick, or a guy injured, and to be able to pull through. And it's, every week starting over with the new 2 matches that you're going to play that week, letting the guys know, how proud of a program this is, where they were at one time, and how they're looking forward to the challenge of beating Ohio State. Because make no mistake about it, there's always a bullseye on our back when we go. And people want to beat the Buckeyes because we have had success, but at the same time, we're pretty grounded, and we understand that it would take nothing for granted. We've got to be ready, and every day's a new match, and you've got to be ready for them because they're quality athletes and quality coaches, and they want to beat us.
Well, I think what's really amazing is to think of where Ohio State's program was before you took over. I mean, you had lost 24 straight conference matches before you took over as the head coach, and now we talk about all this incredible success. How have you turned this into a powerhouse? Kind of what is the formula?
Shame on you for saying that when I was an assistant coach when we lost 30 Big Ten matches in a row, but shame on you. You're back at it, going after me. It wasn't, a lot of work was done. We'd done some, I was the assistant coach for 3 seasons before taking over as the head coach. And we lost every match in the Big Ten those 3 seasons. And, but we were putting in good work. My coach, Coach Daly, was the head coach at the time, and we had a great recruiting class. And I was fortunate after he retired, I got it, and it looked like I'd done some pretty darn good things because we made the NCAA for the first time. But we put a lot of work in for those 2.5 years, and had some young guys who were stepping up, and we were turning the corner. And that next season we went 7-5 in the Big Ten into the second round of the NCAA, and lost to University of Texas in a pretty tight match in Boise, Idaho. So it was great to be in Boise, but now. If I thought about going to Boise, Idaho for the first 2 rounds of the NCAA, I'd be devastated because the top 16 teams get a host in men's tennis for the first 2 rounds, and playing in Columbus, Ohio is where we need to be playing the first 2 rounds.
And important to you, not just because you're the head coach there, but also because you're an alum. How gratifying has it been to do this at your alma mater?
Obviously, it means the world to me. Ohio State, grew up in Zanesville, Ohio, 50 miles east of here, and to have an opportunity to do something like this at Ohio State, who has it better than me with that in that regards? But it's a lot of work. It's there's no days off. It's we practice every Saturday and Sunday. Monday's our NCAA day off. That's when you catch up with all of your paperwork, and it's 7 days a week, 9 or 10 months a year. And there's nothing I like more than going to work with young guys and trying to develop, the team chemistry and then the culture and everything that goes with, running a successful program. And, I'm lucky, and I can't believe that I had the opportunity to be able to do what's been done at the Ohio State University.
Your team trains every day in the Ty Tucker Tennis Center. What's it like to go to work in a building that has your name on it?
I've never said it like that. I've never said the actual name of the building. It's humbling, but I'll tell you what, my mom will tell everybody she sees. So you could be at the grocery store, she could be at the hair salon. They'll leave there knowing that tennis center is in my name.
Well, speaking of your parents, you have an interesting background. You were a fabulous player yourself. As a teenager, you went down to the Nick Bollettieri Tennis Academy in Florida, which is the precursor to IMG. That's now the IMG Academy, which everyone knows so much about. And your roommate there was a fella named Andre Agassi. Tell me a little bit about your experience of spending time with him. He was a phenom, and perhaps the most memorable experience of spending time with Andre.
We got in some trouble together, that's for certain, that year, and had to go over to Nick's house when everybody else went to the mall. Saturdays, you got to go to the mall at the Nick Bollettieri Tennis Academy. That was the big deal. The buses would take you out at 4 and bring you back at 10 p.m. And we got a month taken away of mall privileges, and we'd have to go from 4 to 10 p.m. and pull weeds at Nick's house. So, we had some interesting times, but Andre was a great guy. Actually, in our room also was Martin Blackman, who's the head of the United States Tennis Association now. One room over was a lifelong friend, David Cass, who's in Columbus, Ohio, that was an All-American at Michigan. And we battled back in the Todd Martin and the Malavai, Washington days. And, there's just lots of great tennis at that time, and Nick Bollettieri's was the place to be. And, it was a special time, but there were great players. Courier was there, everybody. But, I lived on the top bunk, and Andre lived on the other top bunk. And we had to, we had some good times. And he was a great man and still a good friend.
That's pretty amazing. Bollettieri is such a great developer of talent. You have turned into a great developer of talent as well. What do you think has made you such a good coach?
Great players, darn good assistant coaches, people who, I've had Justin Kronauge with me forever. He's the program leader in wins at the Ohio State University, and he started coaching, the next day that he graduated. And he grew up in Centerville. I grew up in Zanesville. So I some people ask me all the time, and I say, I think it's pretty easy to go and see my parents who are in Buckeye Lake. His parents are still in Centerville, so we never have to take time off. We're the shop's open all the time. If you want to get better in tennis and you're a student athlete who wants to get better and wants to be coached, we're never on the road. We don't have to take weeks off to go visit family because they're all within 45 minutes. So I think that's been a huge advantage for the men's tennis team at Ohio State. And in an individual sport, there's different rules, NCAA rules, in regards to what you can do in summertime breaks and things like that. Like team sports don't have the ability to get together as a group and practice with their coaches. There's rules, but individual sports, as long as they volunteer their time, they can do it. And I think that's I can get done with this interview, go hit balls, do what I need to do, and I could be at my mom's house by 6:30 for dinner tonight. And I don't ever have to really interrupt practice or anything that we have going on here.
Well, Coach, have a good dinner with Mom if you choose to do that, and best of luck. Best of luck in the NCAA tourney. Again, the #1 overall seed looking to win a national championship for the first time in school history. We will be keeping close tabs on you. Ty Tucker, this was a complete pleasure. Really, really enjoyed the conversation.
I'm sorry, probably won't get good ratings, but I appreciate it.
Big Ten baseball standings. We talked about Purdue and Illinois at the top. Three-way tie behind them. Nebraska, Indiana, Michigan. You also have Iowa above 500. So that's the top 6, very closely bunched in the next group. Remember, just the top 8 teams make it to the Big Ten tourney, which will be in Omaha starting in less than 3 weeks. Mike Huff is back with me. Let's break down some of these weekend tournaments that involve the contenders. And we talked a bit about Purdue, actually quite a bit about Purdue, taking on Indiana here this weekend. Give us a sense for what we're watching in this series.
Well, very excited because as you look at the standings, here are 2 of the teams that are separated by 1 in the loss column and really battling for position, not only for the Big Ten tournament. Both these teams are in the 60s RPI right now. So both of these teams have a chance. If they can make a statement, taking 2 out of 3 or possibly even sweeping, not only do you set yourself up nice in the Big Ten, You're looking now to look beyond the Big Ten. Can I get into that 50, maybe 40s RPI rankings and maybe get that at-large thought going in my mind?
Here's what worries you about Indiana. Not only do they play Purdue this weekend, but then the next two series, Nebraska and Michigan. I mean, it's tough.
They have very challenging.
Well, it can help the RPI if you win them, right?
Yes. Indiana, Purdue. Both of these teams, you think about for Purdue, you got Indiana at Michigan, Illinois.
Yeah.
For Indiana at Purdue, Nebraska, Michigan. This is now, you've got the big boys playing against the big boys, and there should be some separation, giving both the players a lot of confidence going into the Big Ten tournament, but also that separation to know who has that at-large possibility versus who's just going to have to win the Big Ten tournament.
Quick thought on Michigan State this weekend.
Same thing. Michigan right now has done everything right to this point. Michigan State just took 2 out of 3 at Ohio State, so even though they're under 500, they're sitting in that 7 slot right now. Can they take 2 out of 3 from their arch rival and really start to put themselves, get back to 500? Because if you get to 500, you're feeling pretty good you're going to get in the tournament. And once you get in the tournament, anything can happen.
And the Wolverines coming off a sweep last weekend of Long Beach State, which I know isn't a vintage Long Beach State team.
No, but it's still Long Beach State. Yeah, that's a good.
Long Beach State college baseball. That's pretty good. More from Big Ten softball, a 2-team race between Northwestern and Michigan. The Cats leading the way. The Wolverines just a game back in the loss column. After them, 7 teams with either 10, 11, or 12 conference wins. So a very tight race for spots in the conference tournament, which is next weekend in Iowa City. Sammy Netling prepares us for the drama of the next few days.
There are 3 key series that I have my eye on this weekend as we look to close the book on the 2024 regular season for Big Ten softball. Starting out in Evanston, where the back-to-back Big Ten champion Northwestern Wildcats will look to host what can be a dangerous Hoosier lineup at times. And this weekend is all about the pitching staffs for me. Which arms in the circle are we going to see for both teams? Ashley Miller has been red hot for the Wildcats, but is coming off of what could be her most inconsistent outing of the season with the early exit she saw in Game 3 last weekend against Nebraska. And then on the flip side, the Hoosiers have been up and down, dependent on their arms in the circle in Copeland and Kleiman. Which pitching staff are we going to see for the Hoosiers to try to knock off the championship hopeful Northwestern Wildcats? Series number 2 will head to Ann Arbor, where the 2-seed Michigan Wolverines will host their border rival, the Ohio State Buckeyes. The Wolverines go into the last weekend of regular season with a half game behind the Wildcats, and the Big Ten title very much still in their reach. Now, the Wolverines will have their hands full with what can be a dangerous Buckeye offense. 1 through 9, the Buckeyes have one of the most powerful offenses in the conference. So once again, this series is all about the arms in the circle. Can Durkowski continue her gutsy performance we saw from last weekend to keep these Buckeyes off balance? And will the boisterous Wolverine offense that has propelled them in the second half of conference play continue to do what they do best in the box? And our last series to watch this weekend is Nebraska versus Minnesota. While this matchup may not have Big Ten title contention implications, it certainly has Big Ten tournament standing implications and NCAA selection projection implications as well. The Huskers currently are on the bubble right now for NCAAs, and the Gophers are looking to have a momentous finish to conference play to potentially secure an at-large bid in the Big Ten tournament. These two teams have very similar makeups, both very strong offensively, and it's a pitch by committee in the circle for both this year. And so which staff is going to execute a 1 through 9 in the circle, limit the free passes, limit the extra base hits, and try to limit the crooked numbers on the scoreboard? This is certainly looking to be an exciting finish to the Big Ten regular season for the 2024 softball campaign.
Sammy, thanks. We've got a doubleheader on Friday, the regular season's final weekend getting underway with Northwestern hosting Indiana, then Nebraska and Minnesota. Coverage begins at 5 Eastern, only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. Mike Huff back with me as we wrap up our baseball coverage. One more weekend series I wanted to talk about with you, Ohio State and Illinois.
Yeah, Illinois sitting in that #1 spot. Ohio State lost 2 of 3 against Michigan State. So they're sitting on the 8th spot right now if the tournament were to start right now. So they have to find a way. Bill Mazziello done a great job. Young ball club. Can they find a way to win a series? More importantly, can I find a way to win one? And for Illinois, you're going to have to go to Iowa or have Iowa come to you and then end your Big Ten season at Purdue. So this is a series that at home you have to be thinking taking 2 out of 3 and possibly even sweeping if you want to keep in that number 1 spot but still have that momentum going in those last 2 weekends.
Well, Illinois has been virtually unbeatable at home this year.
Only
16-1.
Yeah, it's been awesome to watch.
And it was a non-conference game that they lost, right?
Yep.
So conference play, they've been perfect. You got Nebraska and Minnesota as well in the Twin Cities as well.
Well, and Nebraska is the one team that has been ranked most recently. And this is another one that you're going to be playing Indiana next. But you have a chance going on the road to take 2, if not 3, and get back into that national conversation. Right now, they have the best RPI sitting at 24. So they're probably the one Big Ten team I am most confident will get an at-large if they don't win the Big Ten tournament. But this is going to be big for Will Bolt to get these guys feeling good about themselves.
Good stuff. Piece of football news. Pete Thamel reporting Minnesota transfer Athian Kaliakmanis has been named the starting quarterback at Rutgers.